In this video, we're going to be analyzing sine and cosine graphs. In our first example, we have g of x equals 1/2 of the sine of x minus pi over 3. What does it mean to analyze a graph? Well, if we're going to be analyzing our graph, we're going to need to know the amplitude, the period, the interval, and the 5 key points. So let's go ahead and let's start looking at that now. In order to find those things, we're going to need to know our A, B, H, and K. Here we have our A value out in the front. We have our B value right here is an imaginary 1. There's our H, and because there's nothing in the back, we're going to have a 0 for K. So we have an A value of 1/2, a B value of 1, an H of pi over 3, and a K of 0. This allows us to find our amplitude and our period. Our amplitude and our period are both things that we need to know for analyzing. Our amplitude is the absolute value of our A value. So the absolute value of 1/2 is going to be 1/2. And our period is going to be 2 pi divided by B, which in this case is a 1, giving us a period of 2 pi. From here, we can actually find our interval. In order to find our interval, we're going to be using the x minus pi over 3. Because a normal interval goes from 0 to 2 pi, but we have the h value, our interval is going to shift. So we're going to have x minus pi over 3 equals 0, and x minus pi over 3 equals 2 pi. So from here, we will add pi over 3 to both sides. And we'll do the same thing over here in order to solve for x, which gives us that x equals pi over 3 for the beginning of our interval, and x equals 7 pi over 3 for the close of our interval. We now need to find our 5 key points. So in order to do that, remember that our intervals are broken into 0, 1/4, 1/2, 3/4, and 1. So we're going to be multiplying those intervals, so those pieces, by our period, which is 2 pi. Doing so will give us 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. But remember, we did have an h value which shifted our interval by pi over 3. So we'll need to add pi over 3 to each of those x values, which is going to give us that pi over 3, 5 pi over 6, 4 pi over 3, 11 pi over 6, and 7 pi over 3. To get our y values here, we're going to think about how does a sine function begin? And a sine function begins at our center line. So here, our center line did not change because our k value is a 0. So that means our starting piece is going to be a 0. Then it goes up to the maximum, which is the top of our amplitude, or 1/2. Then back to the center line, which is 0. Then down to the minimum, which will be a negative amplitude, so negative 1/2. Then back to our center line of 0. And these 5 points here represent our 5 key points. And so we found all the pieces necessary to analyze our graph of 1/2 times the sine of the quantity x minus pi over 3. Now let's analyze the graph of y equals -3 times the cosine of 2 pi x plus 4 pi. So you'll notice that we don't really have a b value out in the front, but we have the 2 pi in front of the x. So we're going to need to pull that out so we can have our b value. So what is we'll divide by 2 pi to pull out our b. This gives us y equals -3 times the cosine of 2 pi times x plus 2, which gives us an a value of -3, a b value of 2 pi, an h of -2, and a k value of 0. So we can now find our amplitude and our period. Our amplitude is the absolute value of our a value, and the absolute value of -3 is 3. Our period is going to be 2 pi divided by our b value, which is 2 pi, which will give us a period of 1. We're now ready to find our interval. So we're going to take our inside piece, which is our 2 pi x plus 4 pi, and set that equal to 0. And then take the 2 pi x plus 4 pi and set that equal to 2 pi. we're going to see how the shift has changed our interval. So we'll begin by subtracting 4 pi from both sides, which will give us 2 pi x equals negative 4 pi. Then we'll divide both sides by 2 pi, giving us here that x equals a negative 2. Then on the other side, we'll do the same steps. So we'll subtract 4 pi from both sides, which gives us 2 pi x equals negative 2 pi. Then we'll divide both sides by a 2 pi, leaving us with x equals a negative 1. So this is our interval from 2 to negative 1. So now we're ready to find our 5 key points. And we'll still be using our 0, 1/4, 1/2, 3/4, and 1. So we're going to begin by taking those points in our interval, and we're going to be multiplying them by our period, which was a period of 1, which gives us a 0, a 1/4, a 1/2, a 3/4, and a 1. From there, we need to take care of our h shift. So in this case, h was a negative 2. So we're going to subtract 2 from each of those values to come up with our x values for our 5 key points. Doing so is going to give us a negative 2, a negative 7/4, a negative 3/2, a negative 5/4, and a negative 1. So we can put those into our x values for our 5 key points. Now a cosine function is different than a sine function in that it does not start at our center line. This is going to start at our minimum. And the reason it's starting at our minimum is because it is a negative out here in the front. So from there, we go from our minimum to our center line, to our maximum, to our center line, then back down to our minimum. And we now have our 5 key points. If you were using a calculator to analyze your graphs, you would still need to find your amplitude and your period in order to help you find your 5 key points. It's also helpful to find your interval. To find your 5 key points, you can calculate the minimum and the maximum values using the calculator, and that will help get you your minimums and your maximum for your 5 key points. And then you can just throw your center line into your other points. And so that's how you can use your graphing calculator to assist you in analyzing graphs.